Io walked down the narrow dirt road, her heart racing with a mix of anxiety and determination. Clutching a small cloth bag close to her chest, she felt the weight of her fears pressing down on her. Inside the bag were a bottle of water, a few coins, and the heavy burden of uncertainty. The sun had not yet fully risen, and the village was still cloaked in the soft embrace of dawn. Birds were just beginning to stir, their songs a gentle reminder of the world waking up around her. She had not confided in anyone about her journey today, not Mama Zena, the wise old woman who had raised her since the tragic loss of her parents, nor her friend Kem, who always seemed to know when something was amiss. Even the women at the river, who loved to gossip and whisper, were left in the dark about her plans. Io's stomach twisted with a strange pain, a tightness that had lingered for weeks. She had tried herbal remedies, prayed fervently, and waited patiently for relief, but nothing seemed to help. The whispers she overheard at the river haunted her thoughts. Maybe something is wrong with her womb. She is cursed. That girl is too quiet. Silence had always been Io's companion. She had never been to a doctor before. In her village, people relied on herbalists for healing, but today felt different. A voice deep within her heart urged her to seek help, to confront her fears. As she reached the main road, she spotted a small bus waiting, its engine humming softly. The driver looked at her, his eyes questioning. "You going to the city, girl?" he asked. She nodded, her heart pounding. "You got money?" Opening her hand, she revealed 3 small coins. The driver sighed, but gestured for her to get in. She climbed into the back of the old bus, the torn seat and the window that wouldn't close hardly registering in her mind. All she could think about was the journey ahead. As the bus pulled away from Riverbend, she gazed out at the trees, wondering what Mama Zena would think. Would she be angry? Would she be proud? "It's just a checkup," Io whispered to herself, trying to quell the rising tide of fear. "Nothing scary. I'll come back before sunset." But deep down, she was terrified not just of the doctor, but of being seen, of being touched, of being known. As the city skyline loomed closer, she closed her eyes and held her bag tightly, unaware that her life was about to change forever. Upon arriving at the clinic, Io was struck by the overwhelming silence. She sat on a hard blue chair, the sterile smell of soap and clean floors filling her senses. The walls were stark white, the lights too bright for her comfort. In her trembling hands, she held a form that asked for her name, age, and the nature of her pain. She felt utterly out of place, far removed from the familiar sounds of her village, the clucking of chickens, the smoke of firewood, the soft hum of women chatting under trees. Here there was only silence, glass, and fear. A door opened, and a nurse in white shoes stepped out. "Io from Riverbend?" she called. Io stood quickly, her legs feeling weak beneath her. She followed the nurse down a shiny hallway, each step echoing in the stillness. "You can sit here. The doctor will come soon," the nurse said, gesturing to a small room. Io sat on a chair inside, her eyes darting nervously to the strange bed with metal arms. "Be brave, Io," she whispered to herself. "You are not a child. Just talk, then leave." But when the door opened again, everything changed. Io looked up and forgot how to breathe. The man who walked in was not old or slow. He was tall and strong, his white coat billowing like a soft wind. His skin was the color of rich earth after rain, and his eyes were dark like midnight water. When he spoke, his voice was deep and smooth. "Good morning. I'm Doc Kamau. You must be Io." Words failed her. She could only nod, feeling her cheeks flush with warmth. "Don't be nervous. You're safe here," he reassured her, and she nodded again, her heart racing. "Doctor?" Kamau sat down across from her, his gaze gentle. "First time seeing a doctor?" he asked. She nodded once more, feeling a mix of vulnerability and curiosity. "We'll go slow," he continued. "Nothing happens unless you say yes." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "Do you have any questions?" Io opened her mouth, then closed it again, shaking her head. She could feel her hands twisting nervously in her lap, her gaze fixed on the floor. "Doctor?" Kamau had seen many patients, loud ones, scared ones, proud ones, but none like Io. She was like a small bird, ready to take flight, and something stirred within him. He wanted to help her, but not just as a doctor. He felt a deeper connection forming. As Io sat nervously on the edge of the examination bed, her eyes darted to the silver instruments on the tray. "Doctor?" Kamau pulled on his gloves slowly, speaking gently. "We'll go step by step. If anything feels uncomfortable, just say stop. Nothing will happen without your permission." She nodded, barely breathing, as he handed her a gown. "You can change behind the curtain." I'll step out and knock when I return. A few moments later, the room was quiet again. When the exam began, Io's eyes widened, her hands gripping the sheet tightly, her breath coming in short gasps. Doctor? Kamau's voice remained steady and low. You're doing well. Almost done? Tears glistened in her eyes, and one escaped not from pain, but from the weight of being exposed, truly seen. Doctor? Kamau quietly marked notes on the chart, his focus unwavering. He felt the weight of what he had seen, not just her body, but her silent fear. When he sat across from Io again, her chart in hand, his voice was low and gentle. Io, your pain is real. It looks like an infection pelvic inflammatory disease. It's common and treatable, but we need to act soon. Io gripped her cloth bag tighter, her eyes cast downward. This didn't happen because you did something wrong, he said softly. It's not a curse. It's not your fault. You were brave to come. She looked up briefly, tears brimming in her eyes, her lips trembling. I'll help you, Kamau added. If you let me. Suddenly Io stood. I have to go. I'll come back, she whispered, already turning away. She walked out quickly, past the nurse and down the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. On the bus ride home, she didn't look back. In the quiet room, Kamau stared at the empty chair. I hope she returns, he whispered, a sense of urgency creeping into his thoughts. The bus ride home felt longer this time. The road was the same, but her heart was heavy with the weight of her decision. The city faded behind her, and trees and fields passed by like shadows. When Io reached Riverbend, the sun was almost gone, and the chickens were already in their coops. The women had left the river, and Mama Zena sat outside, peeling yams. Where have you been all day? She asked, her eyes narrowing with concern. Io paused, then said softly, Nowhere. Mama Zena studied her face, noticing the redness in her eyes and the smallness of her voice, but she said nothing more. That night, Io lay on her mat, staring at the roof, thoughts swirling in her mind. She thought of Dr. Kamau, his calm eyes, his gentle voice, the way he had said, You're safe here. But Io did not feel safe. Not inside, not with herself. She felt ashamed that she had been seen, touched, and questioned. The next morning, the clinic called. Io did not answer. They called again the day after, but she let the phone ring. The pain in her body returned, stronger this time, like a fist tightening inside her. Yet still she said nothing. She smiled at Mama Zena, helped grind the maize, fetched water, and laughed at the children's games. But inside, she was afraid of what the doctor had seen, afraid of going back, and afraid that if she spoke, the whole village would know. In the city, Kamau sat at his desk, staring at the empty slot in his calendar where Io's follow-up appointment should have been. He waited, but when she never came, he looked out the window, wondering why. She had run, and he could not forget her, the quiet girl from Riverbend, the one who looked like she might break if the wind blew too hard. A week passed, and Io could not take it anymore. The pain had grown like fire in her belly, her steps had become slower, and her nights were filled with sweat. Even the river water felt too heavy to carry. So early one morning, before the roosters crowed, she left Riverbend again. Again, she told no one, not even Mama Zena. When she arrived at the hospital, her feet were tired, and her face was full of worry. The waiting room looked the same, bright lights, white walls, cold chairs, but Io felt even smaller now, like a dry leaf caught in a storm. A nurse led her down the hall again, the same footsteps, the same soft shoes, the same door. When it opened, he was there, Dr. Kamau, the doctor in the white robe. He looked up from a file and paused, his eyes softening. I was starting to think you had forgotten us, he said gently. Io sat down quickly, her hands shaking in her lap. I was busy, she whispered. Kamau watched her closely, noticing how she avoided his gaze. I see. You missed your checkup. We tried to call. She nodded quickly. The phone. It was not working. Silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. Kamau leaned forward slightly. You don't have to lie, Io. She looked up for just a second, his calm voice searching for something inside her. I wasn't ready, she admitted at last. I was scared. He nodded slowly, his expression understanding. That's okay. No anger, no questions, just quiet. Kamau turned to wash his hands, and Io watched him, captivated by the way he moved with care, the way his words touched her gently like fingers brushing against wild grass. She still felt afraid, but she also felt seen. I'm sorry, she whispered. He turned to her, drying his hands. No need to be sorry, he said softly. Just let me help you. In that moment, something passed between them. Not words, not touch, but a warmth, a knowing, and a question neither of them dared to ask out loud. What is this feeling? And where will it lead? Io sat near the window of a small riverside cafe, the wooden chair creaking beneath her as she held a warm cup in both hands. She liked this place. It was quiet, like Riverbend. The sound of the river nearby made her feel less lost. Birds flew across the sky in slow circles, and the sun touched the water like gold. She opened her book, but did not read, her thoughts drifting back to him. Then a shadow passed by her table. She looked up, and there was Dr. Kamau, his coat absent, replaced by a light blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His arms looked strong, and he held a paper bag in one hand and a coffee cup in the other. Io's heart jumped. He smiled. "I had no idea you came here," he said, stepping closer. Io blinked. "I don't come often." He looked around. "This is my favorite place in the city. The river reminds me of home." "Your home has a river too?" she asked, surprised. Kamau nodded, long and wide. "As a boy, I fished in it with my grandfather." Io smiled shyly, feeling a warmth spread through her. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat without asking. "Do you mind?" he asked. "Anyway," she shook her head, feeling a sense of ease wash over her. For a while, they sat in silence, the river singing in the distance, a child laughing nearby, and the smell of roasted beans filling the air. Io looked at him carefully now. He was not just the doctor in white. He was calm, gentle, and easy in his body. His shirt was plain but clean, and his wristwatch shone under the sun. "You speak gently," she said suddenly. Kamau raised an eyebrow. "Gently?" "Yes," she nodded. "Like water speaks to stones." He laughed, a warm, soft sound that made her smile. "That is the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me." Io looked down at her cup, hiding her grin, and in that small cafe by the singing river, something quiet bloomed between them, something too soft for words but too real to ignore. The rain had just stopped, and the earth smelled wet and sweet. Io sat on the floor of Mama Zina's hut, folding old clothes when she heard a voice outside. "Io." It was Kem, her friend from the river. Io stepped out, and Kem's eyes widened. "You didn't tell me your city doctor is rich." Io blinked, confused. "What?" Kem pulled a small newspaper from her basket. It was old and creased, but the face on the front was clear. Dr. Kamau Odinga, smiling, standing in front of a tall glass hospital. The words beneath his name read, "Son of the great healer, builder of hope, general, youngest hospital owner in 3 provinces." Io felt the sky fall. She took the paper and stared at the picture. His eyes were the same, as was his smile, but this man wore power like a crown. She could not breathe. That night, in the dark of her room, Io sat with the paper in her lap. The candle beside her flickered like her heart. "He owns the place," she whispered. "He is not just a doctor. He is the name on the door." She thought of his calm voice, his clean hands, his soft shirt in the cafe, and the way he looked at her like she mattered. Shaking her head, she said to herself, "No, this cannot be." She stood and walked to the mirror, her reflection staring back at her skin dry from the sun, nails chipped from pounding yam, feet cracked from river stones. A voice inside her whispered, "What has a girl with calloused hands to do with a man whose bed is carved from ebony?" Turning away from the mirror, she felt small again, like when she first entered the city, like when she sat in that bright waiting room with shaking fingers. Io wrapped the paper and hid it under her mat. From that night on, she stopped going to the cafe, didn't answer Kamau's messages, and avoided the clinic. In her mind, he had become something too big, too high, and she was just Io from Riverbend, nothing more. The rain was heavy that night, hitting the tin roofs like angry drumming. Io was late leaving the shop where she worked. Her head ached, and her legs felt weak, but she told herself, just a little more. Just get home. She stepped into the night, the world spinning around her. Her hands reached for something that wasn't there, and then darkness enveloped her. When she woke up, soft sheets and a warm blanket surrounded her. Her body felt tired, her head heavy, and there by her bedside sat Dr. Kamau. His white shirt was wrinkled, and his eyes were red, as if he hadn't slept. "Io," he whispered, "you scared me." She blinked, trying to gather her thoughts. "What happened?" "You fainted. A stranger brought you to a roadside clinic. When I heard I came." She turned away, feeling a mix of embarrassment and gratitude. "You shouldn't have," she murmured. "I had to," he replied, his voice firm. "No, you're—" She bit her lip, cutting him off. "You're someone important. You shouldn't be chasing after girls like me." Kamau fell silent, then spoke in a low voice. "I have known hunger too, Io. Not of belly, but of trust." She looked at him, surprised by his vulnerability. He leaned forward, his voice shaking. "I once gave my heart to someone who only wanted my name, my money. My life looked full, but I was empty. Io swallowed hard. I am not like her. I know, he said softly. That's why I came. She stared at him for a long moment, then whispered, I was scared that I would fall for you, and you'd drop me. Kamau nodded slowly, understanding her fears. I have run from hands that were too soft, fearing they would drop me too. Tears filled Io's eyes. I didn't want to be a burden. You're not, he assured her. I don't fit in your world. Then I'll meet you in yours, he replied, his voice steady. Silence enveloped them, the rain whispering against the window, thunder rolling somewhere far away. Io reached for his hand, hesitating for a moment. He didn't move, but then, gently, like a leaf falling into water, he wrapped his fingers around hers. Two broken hearts, two quiet souls, finding each other in a room full of pain and light. 1 month later, the clouds were dark that day, the kind that cover the sun and silence the birds. Io stood at the edge of the road, her dress clinging to her skin as the rain poured down like tears from the sky. She ran through the mud, past the trees, across the path that led to the city. She did not stop, even when her slippers broke and her breath came hard. Her heart beat steady, and it beat for him. At last, she reached the hospital doors, dripping wet and shaking. A nurse gasped, but Io walked past her, down the hallway she knew too well. At the end stood Dr. Kamau. He turned at the sound of her steps and saw her, her eyes full of rain, her hands empty, her face open like the sky. Without a word, Io ran into his arms. He caught her, holding her tight as she buried her face in his chest and whispered, I'm not running anymore. Kamau's arms wrapped around her like roots around soil, his voice soft against her ear. When the sky opens, it does not ask who is worthy of rain. It just gives. They stood like that, two rivers meeting Riverbend Village. 1 week later, the drums beat slow. Mama Zena placed her hands on Io's head and then on Kamau's. You are not perfect, she said, but you are patient, and that is stronger than beauty. The people clapped, the fire cracked, and Io wore a simple white wrapper. Kamau stood beside her, not as a doctor, not as a rich man, but as hers. Children danced, old men hummed, and women ululated. Love had returned to Riverbend, not in gold, not in grand words, but in the quiet choosing of two hearts that had once been afraid. And now they were home. In so many of our communities, women's health is still surrounded by shame and silence. Girls grow up thinking their pain is something to hide, something to endure quietly. Io's story is not just fiction. It's the story of thousands of young women who suffer in silence because of fear, culture, or judgment. Have you or someone you know ever delayed treatment because of fear or taboo? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk and tell us what city you are watching from. Let's see how far this story has traveled.